Good afternoon, and welcome to today's Activity Strong webinar, Sex and Seniors, Supporting the Rights of Sexual Expression While Protecting the Vulnerable. For today's webinar, we're providing one free NCAP, NCCDP, NCTRC, NAB, and NZSDRT credit. To be eligible for this credit, you'll need to remain on the webinar for the full hour. At the end of the webinar, I will provide the post-webinar CEU survey evaluation link in the chat room, and we'll also send the link by email this afternoon. Please make sure that you check your junk and spam folder for this survey. The survey must be completed by midnight Eastern Standard Time this Thursday. If you have any questions, please email us at webinars@linksenior.com. The CEU certificates will be issued by mail before the end of day on Friday again. Please make sure you check your junk and spam folder for the CEU survey as well as the certificate if you don't see it in your inbox. Additionally, we encourage everyone to participate in the chat throughout the webinar, so please let us know where you're coming from. If you have specific questions for Kelly, please submit those in the Q&A box. Thank you. Look forward to this webinar, and I'm going to turn it over to you, Charles.
Thank you so much. Welcome, everyone. Yeah, I know it's a very important day today, so I want to acknowledge that. I also want to thank you, Kelly. I know there's a formal introduction slide, but I just want to tell you how excited I am to have you to talk about this really important topic. So welcome.
Thank you very much. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah. So everyone, like Emily said, this is one of our Activity Strong webinars. As many of you are aware, Activity Strong was started more than 4.5 years ago now, in partnership with 3 amazing organizations that we recommend: Activity Connection, NAP, and NCAP. So to whoever is certified or part of these organizations today, double welcome, I would say, and thank you for this amazing partnership. My name is Charles de Vilmorin. I was the CEO and co-founder of Link Senior, and I'm now the general manager, Link Senior, with LifeLoop. And on that note, a quick update, which is that as we are merging the companies together, I just want to give you a heads up. I know many of you go to linksenior.com or activitystrong.com to find all these educational resources. And so don't worry, obviously we are keeping and safeguarding and will be promoting these resources, but there will be a slight change as we merge all the online resources. So this will be happening before the end of the year. And if you have any questions, as always, please reach out to us. In terms of background, if you're really new to all of this, I'm not going to go through my whole bio, but I would say that in my career, I was very proud to go through MEPAP 1 to really understand what activities is about. I believe that old people are cool. I was sharing with Kelly earlier. I have this great tie-dye sticker, but we have a lot of other resources to fight ageism. And I'm just so excited about this new journey of ours as we continue our merger with LifeLoop. And I believe senior living is, quote unquote, activity strong. The background on who we are and what we do is that we have deep and strong values that we're very proud of. One of them, obviously, we're here for is Activity Strong. We love the idea of acknowledging the amazing work done in life enrichment. We want to be able to empower and educate these professionals. And obviously, All People Are Cool is us saying that we are not fans of segregation as a whole, especially when it comes to age. I said especially all of the segregation, but obviously the one that we're fighting for with All People Are Cool is age. Link Senior, now part of LifeLoop, is a resident engagement platform. We were touching the lives of more than 52,000 older adults, residents in North America and Canada. And what we do is all about empowering frontline team members so they can engage residents in a person-centered way. In other words, do what they love and more of what they love. Very proud of the fact that we are evidence-based. We did a clinical study. And if you have any questions about all the quote-unquote magic, please reach out to us. So this is the short introduction background. There are so many reasons why I'm excited for today's session. One is I think we'll all agree that we're not talking about sex enough. I'm sure that Kelly would agree to that. But in general, it remains, for some reasons, a taboo topic, whether it's still obviously essential. So I love the title, in essence, as we talk about sex and seniors, and really we think about this fundamental right, this fundamental thing for the quote unquote vulnerable, the residents we serve. So with that, so excited to introduce Kelly to Activity Strong today. Kelly McCarthy is the Vice President of Engagement and Memory Care Services, #Dementia Nerd, for the Northbridge Companies. Kelly, thank you so much for being with us. I will turn it over to you after sharing the webinar objectives, which here they are, and here's the screen for you. Thank you so much.
Excellent. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. And I love seeing all the, let's see, I love seeing all the people and where you're from. All right. Can you see my screen there?
Yeah, absolutely. Just full screen would be slightly better, of course.
Yep. There we go.
Thank you, Kelly. Yeah.
And so, as I saw all of you, I noticed that you're from all over the U.S. I don't know if I caught anyone outside of that, but just so you know, I'm from Massachusetts, which if you don't know what I'm saying today, just stick an R at the end of it, because that's typically what happens when I don't say my R's. So we'll start with a joke that way. But listen, I've got a lot of people up here. It looks like there's over 300 people. So I love to engage. And so how we want to do that is, if I ask a question, or I know the Q&A would be for questions, but in the chat bar, if I talk about something and ask you to answer a question, maybe you could throw it in the chat where you guys can see each other's answers. So that would be great. So Brass Ring Wellness is a company that I own as well. I wrote a book called Brass Ring Memoirs, Encouraging Stories Using Practical Methodologies to Help Caregivers Reach for Their Goal in Alzheimer's and Dementia Care. And so chapter 9 is my section on sex and seniors. And so this is an excerpt of it, and I've added a lot to it as well. So the objectives today, we're going to talk about sex and seniors and intimacy. And why is it so taboo? And the importance of the distinction between sexuality and intimacy, I think, is important. We'll talk about that. I've identified some statistics. It changes as we go on. So I've updated some statistics in the United States about sexuality and intimacy. Supporting seniors in a healthy lifestyle, healthy sex lifestyle while in our care. And then dementia impact. So the challenges in relationships and the residential living and what that entails with dementia. And then protecting the vulnerable, which is the most important thing that we do with regards to this. So protecting the vulnerable, and we'll get to that in a little bit. So let's talk about sex and comfort level. So again, in your chat bar, is it always easy to talk about sex? So what do you guys think about that? The attitude among healthcare professionals. How are your frontline associates and family members when we're talking about sex and sexuality? And so for some people, it's extremely enjoyable. No problem. They're very comfortable talking about it. I have no problem talking about it. But some people, based on their life history, they could be embarrassed about it. Maybe something happened in their life that makes it frightening. And so it's really important as healthcare professionals to identify and acknowledge that, you know what, sometimes it is taboo. And it's important to know that for some it's enjoyable, for some it may be embarrassing and frightening. It may be sacred. And so if it's a spiritual aspect for somebody, that they say, listen, the sex between my partner and I is solely between us, and I don't share that information. So again, it's really important to know that. Before supporting sexual expression in our industry, we need to identify how we feel about it. And not only us, but if you are a person who does in-servicing in your communities or your company, identify if this is a topic for you. And if it is, then absolutely utilize, some of the slides and information that I share with you today. If it's not, though, identify somebody who is comfortable. You don't have to be the person who does it all, but it is important to identify, how do I feel about sex, and how does my team feel about it, and who would be best to be able to share some information and some in-servicing. So sensitivity and cultural education is so important. We're going to talk a little more about that. So what do we know? We know that there may be a decline in the frequency of sexuality as sexual activity as we age. We also know that there is no age limit to sexuality and sexual activity. And this absolutely is for not only individuals who are not cognitively impaired, but for people who are cognitively impaired, there's no difference. Many people may not be comfortable with this topic. We know that it could be taboo. In the United States, we also know that we are open and affirming and sexually diverse. We also know that we outsource our teams from all over the world, which means that they come to us rich with their own culture, their own thoughts and processes about this. And I know I'm going to talk about this in a little bit, but it's really important in your in-servicing and when you're educating your teams is to value who they are and what they bring, but also let them know that we honor their beliefs, we honor who they are as people, but they can't take their cultural beliefs and impose them on someone else. And that's really important. There's a big need for education in the senior support companies, as Charles was talking about. Family education is very important. And then the baby boomers is a generation that's on their way. And if you think about the baby boomer generation, it's also known as a sexual revolution. So how we care for people now may be a little different in identifying the fact that these individuals are individuals that have love the one you're with songs and really an attitude that may be very different than those we're caring for now, or have been, I should say, because we are caring for people in the baby boomer generation even today. So what do we know continued? Sex may be different as we age, yet it is still important to express sexual demonstration, physical touch. And so when I did some research, again, taboo, don't like to talk about this stuff. But what's really important is when I was doing some research, I identified the benefits of sexual activity and masturbation. And I thought this was really important because I mean, I think we've all heard it, especially I'm going to probably say my age group I'm in my 50s. And I remember the joke being, if you touch it, you're going to go blind, right? A lot of different things that people used to say about sex and masturbation. And as I was reading, I found there was a lot of positives, and especially if individuals don't like using medication for certain treatments. If people, maybe it's a Christian Scientist or other individuals who do not like to take medications, masturbation and activity can promote health and well-being. It can manage our depression, boost our mood. It may decrease symptoms related to prostate problems. It improves sleep quality. So if you think about individuals who take gummies at night, there may be a melatonin, masturbating can absolutely do the same thing, which would improve sleep quality, allowing you to fall off to sleep just as quickly as taking a melatonin. Can relieve the discomfort of a urinary tract infection. And so again, this is just a snapshot of the things that I read and really understand to be true. And I think it's important for us to know that, listen, if somebody has masturbated all their lives to get to sleep and now they're in our community, what are we saying to our frontline teams if they are hopefully knocking loud enough and walking in and all of a sudden see someone masturbating? What is it that we're saying that we do for this individual to maintain their respect and their dignity? And also for the frontline associates to know that it's not wrong. Sometimes, again, if it's a cultural belief, they may feel that way. The large majority of seniors, men and women, still are enthusiastic about sex and intimacy. So here's some facts that I looked when I was doing some research. Frequency on a weekly basis after 70. And so don't be upset, women, but men have us a little more ahead of the game here. 43% of men are saying that they're sexually active, where 22% are women. So again, in the chat bar, why do you think that's the case? So why do you think that there are more men having sexual activity than women. And it's a good number here, 43 to 22. So if your answer is, there's less, they're not married. So if the men don't live as long and the women are living without a spouse, that may be something. Men may be, there's a percentage of men that remarry more than a woman does. So these are some statistics that you can find. Now, don't be upset where we've lost ground on the Sexuality and Sex Weekly. Masturbation, we're up by 33%. So masturbating for men is up to 46% after the age of 70, where women are 33%. So again, just this information that to think that these things aren't happening in our residential living and supporting our residents is definitely something that we need to look at. So there was a statistic that residential settings, 77% of staff members acknowledge that residents use masturbation to meet their sexual needs. 48%, so I'm wondering about that other 52, of staff members view training positively. So there's that other percentage that may have a cultural belief that may shy away or not feel comfortable being able to connect or to be able to have a conversation about it. So again, there's opportunity here, making sure that you have someone who's open and able to talk about it. So if you look at this, this was pretty interesting. Research of older population sexual expression has only expanded during the last 30 years. Only 3 articles, academic articles, were composed from 1975 to 1991. 25 studies were done in 1980 to 2014. And it was interesting because I remember my mom and dad are in their 90s now. And I remember my mom coming back from a doctor's appointment and saying, oh, my doctor asked me about sex. And, she felt kind of uncomfortable about it. But again, that I remember it was in between those 1980 and 2014. Most older adults do not feel comfortable talking about sexual health and problems that may occur in their healthcare providers. So this is where, having someone to be able to talk to them about these common problems that they may have, but just to say, listen, if you ever need to talk about it, please let me know. I'd be happy to talk to you and support anything that you need on a medical level. Or just kind of discussing some of the challenges you may have. So common problems, we know that as we age, there's a challenge with vaginal lubrication, performance, pain during sex, and then diseases or health conditions that may impede the process. So again, these are just some things that we want to be mindful to that could happen, and that we can absolutely have a conversation if we feel comfortable. So what do we know? Again, the roles of sexuality increasingly are relevant. They may prioritize, adapt and prioritize sex. They may express it in more diffused ways. Attitudes regarding late life sexuality. Well, look at the next one with aging stereotypes. I think that even seniors may have that stereotype of being in discreet silence, thinking it's distasteful. How many times have you ever heard someone say, if they someone says talking dirty, right? So we have this language that absolutely puts a stereotype on sexuality, so that we really want to make sure we take that back and not use negative words to identify something that is done throughout the world. And so aging stereotypes affecting healthcare policies and attitudes among healthcare professionals. So I am going to talk about that in a few minutes, or policies and the like. So I'm going to hold my thought because I've got some more to talk about. What do we know about same sex? So in the United States, United States is open and affirming to sexual diversity, LGBTQ+. How do we support this population? So again, in the chat bar, how do we support a population of LGBTQ+? And so the answer is coming right up here. It's, I know some of you are answering, just like we would everyone else. Just like we would everyone else, especially through education, right? It's important to support associates and seniors to education in the companies. Family education is very important. And so there are resources in the United States. So in particular, Sage Care, it has a training platform and is a consulting platform for LGBTQ and plus aging. So again, utilizing resources out there to support and letting people know, listen, we are a big melting pot, and to be open and affirming is so important, especially if, and I've come across so many, I think about individuals who may have been in the closet in the 1930s, maybe end up having a relationship throughout their years, coming into our communities, maybe going back in the closet afraid of reprisal. Maybe because their spouse passed, they don't have an opportunity to visit an LGBTQ establishment where they can have another relationship. Also in the opposite way, maybe someone, married and had kids, was married for 17 years or so, and then came out of the closet. And so there's a lot of different things out, opportunities out there for us to learn and to grow and to get support. So Sage Care is one of them. Treat these people no differently. Love is love, and it's so important for us to do that and get the support that the families and the residents need, and our associates. Barriers to intimacy exist in our communities, right? There's lack of privacy. Doors are locked, but it's locked by a master key. Staff and family attitudes towards sex, the myth of when you're geriatric, you're asexual, informed consent issues. And we're going to talk about the capacity to consent and how it waxes and wanes. And so we're going to talk about that as well. And then the lack of partners absolutely can happen as there may be more females than males in communities. So supporting senior sexual lives while in our care. And so this is, and I actually have a PDF. It is from the Jewish senior organization in New York, and it's a sexual expression policy. And so I guess my question to you all, and maybe put this in the chat, is how many of you have a policy on sex and sexual policy? How many of you have? So if you can put it in there, yes or no, if you have a policy on sexual expression, a sexual policy. Now, the other thing is, if you have one, what's it called? Because oftentimes people will use negative words for that. And I'm going to the end here where it says, use non-judgment verbiage. Because I've seen sometimes instead of a sexual expression policy, they call it sexual behaviors or coercion standards. So again, just like that word dirty, we just want to take it away, get it out of there. It doesn't belong here. And so sexual expression policy is definitely much more open. So individuals have the right to engage in sexual expression, regardless of even cognitive ability. Now, again, we'll talk about the challenges that come with that. But again, they have the right. Educate your teams on that right. Also what to look for, and we're going to talk about that. Use individual service plans or the equivalent to follow and make sure that individuals are safe. Space and accessibility. So I was talking to that organization, the Jewish Senior Services, and it was interesting. They had a multi-purpose room that they actually made into an area where they could have a relationship where the door could lock, and one of the residents actually can sign in, and it's just a space where it has a bed and has a bedside stands and lighting, and it's just a space where if they want to have a relationship, because some may have a shared studio, right? And so there's rights there for the person who's in that shared studio. They can't have a relationship within that space. And so as he was talking, this administrator from this company was talking about this new space and how they would sign in and out and use this space and how they in-service their teams on this space. One of the residents raised her hand and she said, I know you have us signing up. Can we block more time than just an hour? Because, it takes us a little longer. And I just thought that was lovely of the person to be able to be just about it and have fun and really be able to talk about it, give the individuals the opportunity to talk. spelling out differences between individuals with cognitive challenges who are impaired and who are not. Policies should really be general and should be dealt with or supported by an individual service plan, a team to identify whether or not individuals are safe, and again, protecting the vulnerable. The options for outside services to determine capacity to consent are so important. I'm skipping around here a little bit. Private acts in public places. It's a no-no. Can't do it. And so that's where we would make sure that we're supporting our frontline associates to identify if they see something, say something, and be able to feel comfortable with a redirect. And what would that redirect be? Protecting the vulnerable, which is something we often say in our company. And then again, using non-judgmental verbiage when doing policies. So when I work with my teams on a frontline level, I talk about sex and intimacy and really talk about the importance that they both bring to the table. So one of the very important emotional core needs is to love and be loved. And for us to give a frontline resident, especially in memory care, the sense of belonging is a part of that, to love and be loved. Intimacy is the act of being close with somebody or something. Familiar, warm, confident, and safe. Right out of the dictionary. And I'll tell you something, I can be intimate with my daughter. I can be intimate with my dad. This is not sexual in nature. This is about feeling familiar, close, confident, and safe. One of the most important gifts that we can give any of our residents is the act of being intimate with them. Sexuality is one human way to express intimacy through words, gestures, physical demonstration of touch. That's different. And of course, that's something that we share with our frontline associates. Under no circumstances should anyone have a sexual relationship. And it's important to say, some people will say, oh boy, why should we have to say that? And I'm sure you've seen at times in the world, in the United States, where there has been situations where, you know what, a conversation should have been had prior to. And so again, talking about that is so very important. So here's the impact of dementia on sex and intimacy and intimate relationships. First, consider what they're trying to communicate with us, non-pharmacological approach. So let me tell you something, and I was debating to say this, but one of the things I do, especially with memory loss, is, if it looks like a beer and it seems like a beer, and it's a beer, right? We think it's a beer. Well, I had a resident once who was drinking what looked like a beer, and the wife said, hey, what do you got there? And he goes, oh, it's a beer. I took it out, I took it out of the grocery bag, and it's in the fridge. And she goes, we didn't get any beer. She opens up the fridge and found Breck shampoo. So again, I'm aging myself again, but if anybody remembers Breck shampoo, it really looks like a beer. Doesn't taste like one, but it looks like one. And the reason why I'm saying this is, as we know with dementia, and as this disease progresses, they may have a very difficult time with judgment and identifying what things are. And so if it looks like sex and it seems like sex, it may not be. And so we really need to make sure that we understand that and that we support them in that realm. And so intimacy, familiar, warm, we talked about, to belong, best thing we can ever give anybody, to love and be loved. Sex, sexuality, using words, gestures, movement, and activities to attempt to display attention. And so again, what does 60 years get you? I'm sure, and I'll ask the question, you can put it in the chat room, but how many of you have worked in our senior living companies? And, maybe there's someone that has been married for 60 years or so, and the husband lives at home in their home, and the wife moves into a memory care neighborhood. What happens? Oftentimes they are looking at a prosthesis. They're looking at a connection. They've been with that person for 60 years. And so now supporting that husband, identifying the why behind the fact that now she is connecting physically, right, to somebody else, or starting out with intimacy and maybe leading into sexual. So again, just things that we need to know and be able to educate and support. Physical conditions, medications, side effects can be misinterpreted. as communication. So again, if it looks like a beer and it seems like a beer, if it looks like sex and seems like sex, anything that is providing blood flow into the vaginal area or the peri area and the like, could be a prolapsed uterus, could be a scrotal mass, could be an enlarged prostate, could be all kinds of stuff, can absolutely cause a person to start to masturbate, right? Could be the blood flows going into that area, and this is what happens. So dementia, impact on sex and relationships. Dementia is not just about memory loss, as we know. It's influenced by motor skills, physical touch, and that could be a challenge. Judgment. They may no longer know how to sexually arouse or satisfy their partner. They may not even be able to do that to themselves. We know that oftentimes if somebody has a heart condition and they are taking medications maybe to for their heart, and now they are no longer able to be erect, but yet they're masturbating and they're trying to come to climax, but they can't because they can't be aroused because of a medical condition, but they don't understand that. And so this is something that could happen as well. They may misread signs from our associates. If our associates are nervous and they laugh when somebody says something, you can only imagine that could potentially mean, hey, I might get lucky tonight. And they continue to do that or say what they're saying to that person. So again, really important to educate our teams, because I'm telling you, if you think it's not happening, we're not in touch with what's going on, because it's definitely happening. May not have the capacity to sequence steps. So again, it's foreplay may have always come before, but at this situation, they may have a challenge or not knowing what comes next or how to. So let's talk about capacity to consent. So just because a person has dementia doesn't mean he or she loses their right to sexual expression. Capacity is the ability or power to do, experience, or understand something. That's the capacity, is to understand something, the power to do or experience. Consent is the permission for something to happen, agreement, all right, to do something. And so as we know, though, the capacity to consent can wax and wane. It can be different for different times of the day, especially for people with memory loss. And so an interdisciplinary team, doctor, nurse, frontline, to monitor any signs of distress, changes in sleep, bathroom use, mood, and eating are all reasons that maybe we can look at that capacity as that person. But I'm going to actually get into this a little more, because we need our frontline associates to help us with this too. Recommend involving a psychiatrist or gerontological psychiatrist or a psychologist when there's a question surrounding capacity to consent. So an interdisciplinary team can definitely look at any signs of distress, changes in sleep and the like. But I would say to my teams, and I always have, is that if we're looking at something that is to determine capacity to consent, I don't believe that we have the ability to do that. I think that we want to involve someone like a geriatric psychologist or psychiatrist to be able to help us identify capacity to consent. And this is where, you know, I think it's important, because they are going to be relying on our frontline staff, our frontline teams. They're not just I hear sometimes, I'm just an RCA, I'm just an aide. And I think to myself, oh my gosh, you are everything to our residents, our families, and to each other. And so I always ask them, pay attention, body language, visual awareness of actions that might be concerning, avoiding eye contact. Maybe somebody who used to look at you and have, you know, be a jovial person is now sad, maybe crying. Is facial expressions are showing anxiety, fear, or anger versus maybe what they had before. So that change, a withdrawal from friends or usual activity, changes in behavior such as aggression, verbalizing. So this was a long time ago. I had a resident in a community, another company I worked for, who the RCA knocked on the door, walked in, and it was in a memory care neighborhood. And there were two individuals, male and female, and the female was giving oral sex to the male. And the female, as soon as the door opened, she said, "I'm done." And he said, "Oh, no, you're not. I'm not finished." And so that frontline associate said, "Oh, yes, we're done. It's time for girls' night. We're going." And was able to redirect and get this person out of the room, identifying that that person, the male, had a heart condition and wasn't able to come to climax. And so that could have been there a long time, that the expression or that relationship at that moment, because again, if that RCA didn't walk in, which we have regulations to identify that, was able to redirect, right? So I'm done, I'm tired, I want to leave now. Make sure your frontline associates know, what that person's saying. Touching their body parts, maybe redness, bleeding from anus or genital area. All very important for our teams to know, the clinical teams, to really look at that. So this is the challenges that can happen around intimacy and sex with individuals with memory loss. This picture is just a stock photo, but it reminds me of when I traveled to Colorado once with another company, and I was doing a talk similar to this, and there was a male, and he was a young guy, and he came up to me and he said, "What do I do when my mother looks at me and thinks I'm dad?" And so I asked him, I said, "Is she looking for sex? Or is she seeing that you're familiar?" And yep, she's saying, his name, but is she looking at you like you belong to me? And he said, "It's absolutely not sex." And what he was doing was saying, "No, Ma, I'm not dad, right? I'm David." And so one of the things I talked to him about was, could you do me a favor? The next time you walk in, if she does that again, can you just feel blessed that she can still see him in your eyes? And that what she's exhibiting is, you belong to me. Again, one of the greatest gifts we can give an individual with memory loss. So again, some of the challenges: misidentification, children, spouses, caregivers. I've been married 3 times. Who am I going to remember? Who am I going to forget? Right? Remembering past marriages and how difficult that can be. And so education is so important. Gender identification, not recognizing maybe that someone is a female because maybe their hair's not done or their makeup and they're holding hands. Sexual expression and activity. So medication condition, sexual activity, hypersexual activity, medication conditions, right? Frontal temporal lobes of trauma that can traumatize, can absolutely cause hypersexual activity. Inappropriate sexual behavior, ISB, I think is overrated. Yes, it does happen. I'm not saying it doesn't, but I do believe that sometimes because of stereotypes and aging, a lot of times people believe everything is inappropriate. And so we really want to make sure people understand what is and what isn't. Private acts in public places is not acceptable. Definitely need to be redirected, but not stopped, right? Redirected into the privacy of someone's apartment if they're gratifying, self-gratifying, that maybe they, bringing them to their apartment versus, having a private act in a public place. Side effects of medication, indifferent behavior. These are all things that can happen. When I do in-servicing with my team, I always, and it's it's not something you can do role play with, right? But you really do want to make sure that they understand, yes, you have cultural beliefs, we get it, but when you walk into somebody's room, we want to make sure that if you see something, say something, but maintain dignity, never laugh, never shame. We want you to be a detective, right? So you're working with the team, use what you know about them to identify what they're communicating. Again, I had a gentleman who had a scrotal mass and it was putting pressure on his scrotum. And so what he did was he would masturbate, relieve the pressure. And he was doing it in a public place. We needed to move him to a private place for that to happen, allowing him to happen, not go and look for a medical reason why we need to stop him to do that. Kind of identifying the why. Is there a medical issue? Is there a personal history? And what do you say when somebody expresses sexuality? Express their sexuality. And this is important to talk to your frontline teams to say, hey, Has anybody ever said anything to you that about a sexual favor, asking for a sexual favor, asking to maybe touch something or do something with you? What do you say? And so having that conversation with them will give them the ability to process it with you. The nervous laughing again could be an insult or could be a come on. Being able to talk to them about what do they say. And so I've said before, you know, just because someone has memory loss doesn't mean we can't hold them accountable. It doesn't mean they're going to remember, and it's okay if they don't. They're not giving you a hard time. This disease, they're having a hard time. So if somebody says, you know, something to you, you might say, hey, that's making me feel uncomfortable. I see that you're safe. I'll be back. Or I'm married. I'm not that kind of a woman, or I'm not that kind of a man, or you know, again, making me feel uncomfortable. My husband wouldn't approve. My wife wouldn't approve. Now they might come with some comebacks. I've had somebody once, I said, I'm not that kind of a lady. And he looked at me and he said, well, I'm that kind of a man. And I said to him, I said, you know what? You're making me feel a little uncomfortable. I says, I'll be back. They knew that they were safe. Utilizing your male associates. Maybe you don't have male RCAs, which are caregivers, but maybe you have a chef or a maintenance person. Now, just a standby might deter them and help them through that process of being appropriate. So again, those are some of the things you could do. And so in my book, I talk about takeaways. So home-based caregivers know how important it is to connect with someone regarding the challenges you are facing around sexual intimacy. So really kind of going to groups that may have a talk like this, physician, if you are comfortable with clergy, if the Alzheimer's Association, any type of organization that might be able to help you through any challenges. And then understand that, like we talked about sex being important, intimacy being important, it may be a little diffused. So, you know, utilizing, and I'm sure my mother wouldn't mind this, but I know that my mom and dad, they're 90, soon to be 91 years old. And, you know, him helping her off with the bra and rubbing her back, she's putting on lotion on his feet before and his legs before. These are some ways that they can connect and feel intimate and close to each other, and giving that warm kiss afterwards. So again, it could be a little different. It's okay. Just be creative with the tasks that you're providing to create intimacy. And so and so going back, I had a talk just like this. It was actually the Alzheimer's Association in Rhode Island, and one of the attendees was a woman, a senior, say she was in her 80s. And she had a gentleman, she came up to me, she waited till everybody left, and then she came up and she said, what do I do when my husband's always asking for sex? And I said, well, first and foremost is if it's excessive, if it's hypersexual, you want to see the doctor, make sure nothing's going on with him that's causing this hypersexuality. So I always like to look at medications, look at what's going on with him medically to see what it could be. And I said, so what do you say to him? And she says, oh, I just slap his hand and tell him to go downstairs. So they have a rumpus room. He has a TV. He pops in a video that's already set up, and he masturbates in that area. And she felt vulnerable to me to say, am I right for doing this? And so, you know, I think sometimes people just need to feel it's okay. Especially in this generation, she may feel that she's failing as a wife because she is not providing what maybe she had in her cohort years ago. So again, it's just really important to, you know, talk it through with individuals, how they feel, and support them. It's very important to understand your responsibility is always to protect the vulnerable. And so in my company, we always ask that they bubble up any kind of sexual encounters, that the home office is aware that I can support them. It would be me, and I could support them through the process. Maybe talk to families, discuss the process, because it can be scary, and it can be very sad, profoundly sad for someone who maybe, you know, has guilt already on their side from the placement, and being able to support that family. As an associate, we said under no circumstances should anyone engage in sexual acts. And again, important to put it out there on there. If you're asked for a sexual favor, again, absolutely not. And, we do talk about it. I have, conversations with frontline associates about these things to make sure that they understand. Respond to sexual advances. Lastly, understanding that those we care for still need to love and be loved. So how do we do that? Remembering it's not sex, it's a gift of closeness. So, if there is maybe and just an example, if you have a resident who's touchy-feely as you're walking around, you are going to step away. But listen, if that person is touchy-feely to a female, maybe a male person could walk by and give him a handshake, pat on the back, massage on the back, whatever. That still is that close, that gift, that intimacy. Giving somebody a handshake, having them know that they care is so very important. It's important that you find ways to the team to create successful means to connect with individuals that you're caring for. So in conclusion, recognize there can be challenges concerning sexual activity in individuals with dementia. Work with your team and resources. Understand the capacity to consent absolutely waxes and wanes, right? It waxes and wanes in me. I'm a morning person. I like to get up and I'm fresh as a daisy and I'm working, and by 4 o'clock, I'm exhausted. And so these are things that can happen to us in our clocks. So know that even with somebody with memory loss, especially with memory loss, the capacity to consent can wax and wane. Continuous education on the subject of the rights of an individual is extremely valuable for your organization and for the people you care for. Outside support, again, geriatric psychiatrists, psychologists, to identify capacity to consent. And then clear policies is always a win-win on sexual expression. All right. And I believe I am finished. So I'm going to stop sharing. Just checking out there to see if anyone has any questions. Hi, Charles.
Hey, Kelly, how are you doing?
Good. I'm doing good. How about yourself?
Good.
Hope I didn't miss too many R's.
You made me laugh there. Yes. I didn't hear any R's that were missed.
Right. Sometimes I add them too. That's even worse.
Yeah.
I have an idea.
Sorry, Kelly. I'm curious, before we start in this kind of conversation to grab questions and so on, do you mind sharing, actually there's a few questions I want to unfold so people can get a better picture of who Kelly is. Do you mind describing a little bit your work, how you got kind of an expert or at least interested in this topic?
Mm-hmm.
And if there are other people in your type of position on the line, why you feel it's important? And I know you've said it, but like from your perspective, so they can better understand why it's so important.
Yeah, I mean, we just kind of, we fall into these niches, right?
Mm-hmm.
And when you're comfortable with something, and it just feels right to be able to kind of stand on that soapbox.
Yeah.
I took care of my Nana was my best friend. She was 70 when I was born, and she died in my arms at the age of 94. Probably one of the best experiences I've ever had in my life, besides giving birth to 2 children. And so my mom, my dad also, he's 90, he's on hospice. He's right now extremely vulnerable with his health-wise, but he also just made me real comfortable going into the healthcare industry. We used to go into nursing homes after church on Sunday. It's probably because I was still in a dress and still clean and not messed up from playing around. So he'd bring me, and when I went into these nursing homes, that's all I saw was love.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't smell anything. I didn't see old. I didn't see wheelchairs. I didn't see beds.
Yeah.
I saw smiles, and I saw people cooing and cawing on me. And it was just, it just made me feel comfortable coming into the industry that I am in. And so it was memory care that I gravitated towards as I was, in the industry. And so I think it's because they're vulnerable, and I see it, and I see the need to educate our frontline teams, especially because we're outsourcing all over the world, and their beliefs about sexuality can be so different than ours.
Yeah.
And even though we're taboo, right? we still, it might be something sacred that we don't talk about. But there may be people that's, you know, and again, it could be a religious belief. Hey, you know, you're going to go to hell. You shouldn't do that. You know, and I think that it's so important to make sure that people understand that, yes, you have beliefs and we honor that in you, but we really want to make sure you don't impose that on someone else. I don't know if I answered your question, but I think just, it could be anything, whatever you guys do, love it, find your niche, and go for it. And again, this may not be your niche. You know, you may have, this might have been the longest hour of your life. And, you know, and that's okay.
Yeah.
Hopefully you can think somebody else in your organization might be good at this. And so
Yeah.
don't feel bad if it's not.
Thank you for this answer, Kelly.
You're
That's-
welcome.
Yeah. I don't know if you have the chat open, but the chat has been one of the busiest chat we've seen this year. obviously,
Nice.
For a lot of different reasons. But I just want to acknowledge what you just said, which is that, you know, maybe sometimes the topic is not our topic. And I think like everything else in life, it's totally fine. There's a few questions that I thought were really interesting too, because they just came up several times. Is, you know, you spoke about it in details at the beginning, but then you alluded to that several times. You know, in our homes, in our communities, right, we have like huge age ranges, right? We could have somebody who's late 90s and somebody who's like early 70s. What have you found to be the best between communication on this topic between residents when they are one generations apart? And the question that came up sometimes is like tips and advice, like anything you have about that.
So you're talking about a relationship between individuals that may be generations apart.
Correct.
Well, I mean, I think that this should be no different than what's outside in the world, right? It's one thing if somebody's, you know, I mean, we know when somebody's 15 or 16, somebody's 20, it's a little different, or, you know, but when somebody's 20 and somebody's 40, it's not different.
Mm-hmm.
And when somebody's 60 and 80, it's not different. It's love.
Yeah.
And so, you know, I think, you know, are these two consenting adults? And do they have the capacity to consent?
Yeah.
I think that's what's
Another
important.
question and multiple questions all about the disconnect between family members and what the residents want. So, you know, just for the sake of it, I'll just read one of the questions, but there was a lot about it. What do you do when the individual is a Medicare resident, has consent, but the family is just not happy with it and does not want to see or talk about it and so on?
Yeah, so again, this is where I am brought in and
Yeah.
I talk to them. I do use, you know, certain books that I've come in contact with. I might talk about Sandra Day O'Connor and the
Mhm.
situation that happened with her and her husband, where he was failure to thrive, went into a nursing home and met another Sandra Day. Who he introduced to his wife as Sandra Day, and Sandra Day was a friend. And so, you know, I think it's important. Yeah, I even think advanced directives are important.
Yeah.
For people to really understand, what would you want?
Yeah.
I'm very open and affirming, and I'm very, you know, I want to be happy. And if the Alzheimer's, if I have a diagnosis and I find love with someone, I'm okay with that. And if I'm married on the outside, I'm still okay with that. This
Yeah.
stinks. It robs me. It robs the people that care for me
Yeah.
every single day.
You know, Kelly, there's another topic which I think is fascinating. In short, is, you know, as people change with a diagnosis, right? There's this ethical debate of who's right. Would it be the person who wrote a will before getting a diagnosis or the new person? And obviously that has an impact.
Yeah, it does.
People have loving relationship.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I
And
know.
I think that's very hard. And I know that we had a conversation about that before. And I'm of the belief that right now, where the power of now
Yeah.
by Eckhart Tolle is a great read. And
Yeah.
so I believe where I am right now is where I want to be. And so my directives would be very open
Yeah.
to where I am right now. And what's going to make me happy and I'm not hurting anybody. That's important. And I know
Yeah.
it's not for everybody, and that's okay.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot to unpack right there on this particular topic, and you and I can probably spend the afternoon talk about it. But I profoundly, I mean, again, my personal belief, I profoundly agree with you that right now, the person as is the source of happiness for that person for sure. We have 5 more minutes. So there's maybe 1 or 2 questions that I'd like to ask you to go deeper in this, or more if we can. But one of them, given your experience, right, in the industry, you've been in the industry for I don't even know how long, but I'm going to assume at least 1 or 2 decades. Yeah.
Yeah,
Like
about 30 years.
Yeah, sex. How has that changed? I'm curious. Like, what, give us a few ideas of what it was then, because I'm sure it's changed, and what you see today, and maybe what you would like to see next year, or to give us that timeline.
Yeah, I don't think sex has changed. I think our understanding and education about it, it's always been there.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I meant more like how we deal with it.
Right. So
Yeah.
education is key.
Yeah.
And I think that, like, again, I think I will be surprised if many of you said that you had a policy on sexual expression, but it's getting better.
Yeah.
So I think that in those days, we didn't have that. And if we did have it, it was on sexual coercion,
Yeah.
or it was on a behavior.
Yeah.
So it was negative. So I think that, what I've seen is definitely a change in awareness, and also the fact, again, LGBTQ and pride, and being able to celebrate and honor all walks of life and all beautiful people. And I think that that's a big change. And we're going to see even more change with, again, the sexual revolution of the baby boomer generation.
Yeah. Isn't that going to be interesting?
Here we come.
Yes.
Oh, wait a minute. I'm a little too young, just so you know. I'm not there yet.
No, I know, but I'm more
Generational.
smiling about the generational,
Yeah.
and what it's going to do to the
Very different, because the seniors that we took care of before didn't express themselves, or maybe, again, thinking it was a discreet silence, right? They didn't talk about it. There was that negative stereotypism that people had.
Kelly, thank you so much for being on with us today. I learned,
Sure.
so I'm going to assume that many have learned.
Charles, before we
I need to wrap.
end, there's a couple of questions. I'm sorry, before we end, there's a few questions in the Q&A that.
Yeah. Thanks a lot. I mean, what if a resident partner is uncomfortable with them being sexual with other residents?
So say that again. What if
a resident's partner, so the partner of a resident, is uncomfortable with them being sexual with other residents?
Right. So yeah, and that was a question like you shared before. So I have spoken to many of family members, their husbands and wives, on this very topic, and been able to kind of help them through the process. But at the end of the day, if they are not, you think about independent living, assisted living, people sign themselves into our care and the like, but in our memory care neighborhoods, they are moved in, they're placed in our care, and they have a consenting person. They have like a power of attorney. So it's really important to make sure that we're supporting their rights as well, because they are their loved one's caretaker. But it's about education, and it's about making sure that we are sharing what we feel is important and keeping them safe. Now, with that said, I believe that everybody on this call, if you're working in senior living, you're not providing one-on-one care. So short of having somebody, a loved one, pay for one-to-one care so that doesn't happen, but we can't guarantee it. We can do the best we can to support a redirect if we need to redirect and separate individuals. But if we're not a one-on-one community or setting, then that's impossible to do without the support of a one-to-one from the family. Does that make sense?
It does.
But I hope that we could come to something better than that before that. Okay.
Right. Well, as we wrap up again, Kelly, for the third or fourth or fifth time, I want to thank you again for such a great educational and interactive session. To everyone who joined, I hope you learned something. I also want to thank you because, like many have said, it is not an easy topic. So just you showing up makes it important and obviously, hopefully helps you in your day, especially if you're serving older adults in your communities. With that, let me just share a couple of announcements before we wrap up. Again, this is the formal slide to thank you, Kelly. But we do have an upcoming webinar that we're also very excited on a different topic, but still around resident engagement and memory care. And this is The Secret to Engaged Happy Residents with Rochelle Wonderland, who's the CEO and founder of a great organization called Dementia by Day. And then as we continue building the rest of our educational series, I wanted to share with you that we're very, very, very excited to announce that on December 3rd, we'll have our annual winter gathering. And this one is going to be very special for many reasons. But one of them is we're talking about one of our favorite topic, which is the sense of belonging. So how do you go from a vision, which most organizations have, but how you build it in your operation and make it happen every single day? And with that, I'm excited to share that we're partnering with a great organization called Dementia Action Alliance. Some of you might recognize the name because they've been on Activity Strong before, but they are they were founded and are run and advocate for the voice of people living with dementia, with cognitive change. So very excited about this. More to come. But in the meantime, again, thank you all for joining. Wishing you an amazing end of the day and week. And let's continue all to learn. Thank you, Katie. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.